Good evening, everybody. My name is Hugh Barrett, and I am the board president of the Springfield Public Forum. And on behalf of the board of directors, I'm delighted to welcome you here tonight to this, what we hope is a very inspiring program, talking about the 50th anniversary of Title IX. First, just a few thanks. We'd like to thank MassMutual for their support tonight. MassMutual has been a long-time supporter of the forum and a great kind of corporate citizen, and we really appreciate their ongoing support. We'd also like to thank our premier media sponsor, Mass Live, our media sponsors, the Republican New England Public Media, and we'd also like to thank all of our individual donors who support the forum. Thank you all for your support. Your support is what makes the forum possible. Very briefly, this is only the second time in our 80-plus year history we've ever had an event where we partnered with another organization, and we're delighted to partner with the Basketball Hall of Fame tonight. Like many of you, I grew up a basketball fan. I grew up playing the game and didn't quite realize how privileged I was to live in the city where basketball was invented and where the Hall of Fame is located today. So we're super appreciative of the partnership with the Hall, their staff's hard work, partnering with Michelle Marash, our executive director, who also worked very hard to bring this event to you tonight. So we really appreciate the Hall of Fame's partnership on this, and hopefully we can do more partner events in the future. I'm going to now just introduce John Dleva, who's the president and CEO of the Basketball Hall of Fame, and John's going to come up and say a few brief words. John?
Thank you. Good evening. It's nice to see everybody here tonight. Very exciting program that we have and some very special guests. I didn't know, Hugh, this was only the second time you partnered with an organization, and we're all still speaking, so that's a very positive thing. So I do want to thank Hugh and his board for the collaboration that we've had. We've been able to bring 8 Hall of Famers to the city this evening. We have 6 on stage with us. We have some senior executives and media people from the industry. It's the 50th anniversary of Title IX, and I think most everybody in this room probably has some familiarity with Title IX. It was an outgrowth of the 1964 civil rights legislation. It said on the basis of sex there could be no discrimination if there was federal funding. It didn't start specifically for sports. It started with education, but quickly, and I think most notably, it applied to women's sports, and we've seen the growth of women's sports as we look back in history and a bright future ahead of us. I do want to mention Michelle Marash, who is the executive director of the Public Forums. She has been a joy to work for. Work with, I should say. I guess work for, actually. She's been handling us very well. And it's a delight to partner with the Public Forums. We thought this was the right place. I guess we could have done this at the Hall of Fame and on Center Court, but we thought this was the appropriate place. And by the way, this is where we have our enshrinement ceremony every year. So if you're around the weekend after Labor Day and you want some more basketball entertainment, we'll certainly look us up. Just my last comment is that, as most of you know also, the game of basketball was invented in 1891 by James Naismith right up State Street in what is now Mason Square. And it was 3 weeks later, after he invented it for the men, if you will, at Springfield College, he was visiting Senda Berenson at Smith College and introduced the game to women. So it didn't take 3 years, it didn't take 3 months, it took 3 weeks to introduce the game to women. And I think that Dr. Naismith would be very happy that we're celebrating tonight the anniversary of Title IX and the fact that equity and equality is working its way up in sports. I think he would also kind of wonder why it was necessary to have Title IX and why there wasn't that equality. That's the kind of guy he was, and he wanted everyone to enjoy the game of basketball. So I will say we're getting there. And with that, I would like to introduce on stage Tara Long, the head of MassMutual U.S. Technology and the chair of MassMutual Women's Leadership Business Resource Group, to say a few words on behalf of our great presenting sponsor, MassMutual, and to introduce our first panel. So, Tara?
Thank you, John, and thank you, Hugh. I'm just delighted to be here and have the opportunity to represent MassMutual at this event, and just super excited to just be here because diversity, equity, and inclusion is a critical component to MassMutual's strategy. and MassMutual is proud to be supporting this event and be affiliated with celebrating the 50th anniversary of Title IX. And we're also proud to support two amazing Springfield institutions, the Springfield Public Forum and the Basketball Hall of Fame, who've organized this historic event for us this evening. For many women across America, the opportunity to participate equally in athletics was such a pivotal point for them. For me personally, I didn't play basketball, but I did play soccer throughout my life. I was the captain of my high school soccer team and also played on the soccer team at Mount Holyoke College, an all-women's college right here in the local area. My experience playing on soccer teams has definitely helped shape who I am as a leader today, whether that's learning about team dynamics, working towards a common goal, and perseverance in the face of challenges. So advancing women athletics is something that personally resonates with me. I now have the honor of being able to introduce our next panel of speakers and moderator. Jody Conrad, 1998 Hall of Fame inductee, former women's coach at the University of Texas with over 900 collegiate wins, a 1986 NCAA championship, and 21 NCAA tournament appearances. Donna Lapiano, CEO of the Women's Sports Foundation from 1992 to 2007, and in that role, she ensured collegiate compliance with Title IX legislation in the collegiate and scholastic arena, named one of the top 100 most influential people in sports by Sports News magazine. Sylvia Hatchell, 2013 Hall of Fame inductee, former women's coach at the University of North Carolina, earning an NCAA national championship in 1994 and an Olympic gold medal in 1988. Nancy Lieberman, 1996 Hall of Fame inductee, two-time collegiate national championship player, three-time college All-American, distinguished pro career spanning 28 years, and the first woman to play on a men's professional basketball team, one of basketball's most decorated athletes of all time. And here to moderate the discussion is ESPN's Christine Williamson, host of Hoop Stream's Countdown to Game Day, and has anchored ESPN Sports Center. Thank you.
Hello, 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 hello. Can you hear me? Okay, there it is. What's going on, guys? How are we today? This is going to be a lot of fun. I'm excited. Okay, so I'm going to start with Jody because we are all in a post-Title IX era. So can you set the scene for us and what led to Title IX?
I think there were a lot of young women in various parts of the country that were playing sports, organized or otherwise, and many of them did not realize that it wasn't happening all over the country for other little girls and young women. And suddenly they end their high school career, they graduate, and they wonder what's next for them in sport. And the question at that point was probably not much. So at some point in time, questions began to ask, what can we do? Why are my brothers playing sport, getting scholarships, and having a platform to show their outstanding skill? And the right people finally asked those questions, and thankfully the right people finally answered those questions. But it's always going to be puzzling to me as to why it took a federal law to change the landscape, not only in athletics, but in law and medicine, and so many fields where women were feeling excluded because they didn't see anyone who looked like them. So that question being asked enough, and the right people answering that question with Title IX, I think changed everything for all of us.
And it's actually crazy. You mentioned the fact that it took a passing of law, but still, even after that law was passed, people trying to fight it and not apply it to women's college athletics, which I still think is also very crazy. Donna, I'm going to go to you because a lot of people in the audience probably don't know this, but you were actually an All-American softball player. You were a multi-sport star in high school, right?
My younger years.
That's what we all say. We used to be that way, not anymore. But that's awesome. And you obviously grew up playing sports. So what was that experience like for you?
Well, I grew up on a street with 15 boys and only one other girl. I thought I was a boy until I tried out for Little League baseball. And after being drafted #1 in the Mickey-Leone Little League in Stamford, Connecticut, a very tall father came to stand beside me as I was in line to pick up my first real uniform and baseball cap. And he opened the Little League rule book, and on page 14 in the center of the page were 4 words that would change my life forever. And those words were, "No girls are allowed." So I wasn't allowed to play with my friends. I was about 10, 11 years old. And I cried for 3 months. My parents looked for a softball team, that's what girls did at the time, for almost 5 years. And I had to wait until I was 16, working age, to join a corporate outside team to play softball. So being an All-American is an accident of history. I was supposed to be a pitcher for the New York Yankees.
I know you would have done that too. I love that. We were talking a little bit before about how aware women student athletes and girls are of Title IX, because I was a student athlete and I honestly didn't really understand how much Title IX impacted myself as a scholarship athlete. Nancy, when you grew up, how aware of Title IX were you?
Well, the assumption is that I grew up, by the way. I am honored to be here with this esteemed panel, but much like many athletes of my era, we didn't really know what Title IX was. I didn't realize until I had gotten to Old Dominion. I received the Donna Doyle Scholarship Award. It was a full scholarship. I thought every one of my teammates had full scholarships until midway through my freshman year, and I found out there were slivers. But I thought all the guys had full scholarships on the men's side, and I was very disappointed. And some of you know Dr. Jarrett, who is our athletic director, and I said, how can this be? How can it be that I'm the only full scholarship? It's not fair. And with that, we internally had discussions about trying, this is back in 1976. We were aware, but I didn't even know what Title IX was. It wasn't shared with us. Nobody brought it up, and it is, in my opinion, one of the 6 or 7 most important laws ever. Equal pay rights, women's voting rights, the Educational Act of 1972. It was something that has changed the course of history for women. John DeLeva said this earlier tonight. Back in 1971, before Title IX, it was a 13-to-1 ratio, boys playing with women, women participating in sports. In 2022, right now in real time, at the high school level, it's a 1,000% increase in participation, and at the NCAA level, it's a 600% increase. So, right, if you build it, they will come. If you give us an opportunity to play, to participate, and to get educated, this is what will happen. You will see the dynamics you have in women's athletics right now.
That's awesome. How have you seen, Nancy, I'm going to follow up with what you just said. How have you seen directly, obviously a lot more student athletes playing, but how much does that impact women and girls as they grow up and play sport?
It's powerful, because I can tell you just firsthand. You know, I'm a kid that grew up in New York City. I was a poor kid, one parent, no food, no heat, you know, no electricity. I was pretty broken as a child. And when I started playing sports, football, baseball was my best sport, and then basketball, I started to breathe, and I started to feel confident. I don't know if I had depression or mental health as a young person, but those of you who have known me since I was young, you know, people talk about my tenacity. That was my mechanism to cope, because I needed sports more than sports needed me. And I see young people today, and they need the health, the education, they need the interaction with one another. And look at, there'd be no WNBA without Title IX. There'd be no women coaching in the NBA like myself or Becky or many others, or me coaching in the Big Three currently. We wouldn't have these opportunities. But then you have people like Donna Lopiano, who has dedicated her life to Title IX and legislation and trying to open those doors, not only for us, but the generations after us. And then you have coaches who have sacrificed to give us those opportunities. And I don't know if I've ever publicly thanked all three of you for what you've done for me as an athlete, as a woman, and as a friend. And I thank you from the bottom of my heart.
One of the things that you mentioned was how student athletes today, they are very vocal about mental health and a lot of the issues that they're going through. Sylvia, I'm going to ask you this. How much do you feel like student athletes have differed in the last 10 years from when you first started coaching?
Well, that's a loaded question. They're very involved in other aspects of coaching besides just coaching. The mental health is there, everything off the court, and then they question a lot. Used to be, I remember one time Pat Summitt said she had 2 rules. Rule number 1 was the coach was always right, and rule number 2 was when you question rule number 2, you know, you refer back to rule number 1. Coach was always right. So, but they are questioning a lot of, they want to know why you do everything. Not just that you're going to do something, but why you're doing everything. And it's just so much broader now, and recruiting is so much bigger now also than whenever, 10 years ago. But and then with NCAA, there's so many rule changes that have happened that is really affecting players now in the game. But it's grown, but yet also the opportunities for women is probably something that's happened the least as far as coaching opportunities and all that. So it's changed, some for the good, but some not for the good. So, but we're doing, Title IX is something to really celebrate. I was a sophomore in college when Title IX was passed, and it is something that we're very thankful for. But I feel like in the last several years we've sort of come to a standstill, and that we've got a long way to go. We still got a lot of room to go, and a lot of things that we need to do to help all these young girls that are playing sports now. And I want to be instrumental in planting seeds and helping those young women have not just opportunities to participate in sports, but to coach the sport that they love and that they've spent the majority of their life as a part of.
You mentioned some of those changes in college athletics, one of those being NIL. It was very interesting to see that a lot of the top earning college student athletes are actually female student athletes, which I think is awesome. But we were talking a little bit before, and you were talking about how many head coaching vacancies there are in women's college basketball. What do you think needs to change in order for that to change?
Wow. Well, it used to be coaching, you coached during the season, and you had some time off, especially in the summer and all. But now, girls, they'll participate in several sports until they get to be 12 or 13, and then they specialize. They'll pick a sport and they'll specialize in that sport, and they play year-round. So there's really no time to do anything else. So it's become a one-sport passion that you do and you have pretty much all the time. And so it's definitely changed. And I think multi-sport athletes are the better athletes, because then I think the injuries, there's a lot more injuries because the females aren't getting any time off to rest their bodies. I think that's a big thing. But, you know, it's really changed a lot over the years. And the coaching opportunities now for the women, you know, it's hard to have a family. It's hard to do other things and coach because it's year-round. I know one time, and I coached for 44 years, I know one time someone asked me, said, over all these years that you've coached and all these things you've done, USA basketball and everything, winning over 1,000 games, said, is there anything that you needed that you didn't have? And I looked at him and I said, yes, a wife. Because, you know, it really takes a lot. It's your whole life, it really is. But when you're like us, and you love it and you have a passion for it, you know, you don't complain. I mean, you know, I look at the older coaches up here, and what you know, I've known most of them many, many years, and as we've come through the time period of Title IX, you know, many of us, we drove the bus, we washed the uniforms, we swept the floor. You know, if it got done, we did it. But we didn't complain. We did it because we loved sports and we loved participating.
Jody, I'm going to go back to what I asked Sylvia a little bit ago. How do you feel like college student athletes have changed over the last 30, 20, 40, however long, many years?
Well, I think for one thing, the opportunity for sports, the opportunity to be whatever you want to be, has given women a voice. And that voice manifests itself in a number of ways. Some of it very, very good. Some of it from a coaching standpoint may not be quite so good, as Sylvia alluded to. But I really believe that people have always valued life skills learned through sports for men. How to be goal setter, how to be intense, how to be passionate, how to work together as a group, how to communicate. All of those skills, I think, happen when you're a part of a team. And we've always said those are skills that help men get ahead. And now we have finally come to the realization that those very same skills are beneficial for women. And we've seen women use those skills. It's not uncommon to see women in roles of leadership, to see them in the C-suite, to see them assert themselves in Congress and other ways that women would not have been common, and ways that women would not have been respected had they not gone through the process and earned the right to share their voice and to use their voice to help other women as they move forward.
I love that. Nancy, I'm going to follow up with you on that because I think that's awesome. Being an athlete, what did that teach you? How did that help you as a human as you went about the rest of your life?
When I think about sports, I think about, you know, kind of the bottom of John Wooden's pyramid. All my core values as a person, as a mother, as a philanthropist, as a coach, has come from those core values. It taught me how to compete, how to win, how to lose, how to be responsible, how, you know, to be trusted by not only by my teammates or by, you know, whether it was my owner, if I was playing. There's so many ingredients you have to have in life, and the greatest thing you can ever have is your character, right? I'm not in control of my reputation, but I'm always in control of my character and what I bring. And that is something that sports taught me. Know the power you don't know you have. I have the power to be an influencer. I have the power just because, you know, don't let my stilettos confuse you. I want to win, and I want to compete, and I want to be great at whatever I do. I want to have intentional greatness. But I don't think we can lose sight of the fact that as women's sports is turning the corner and going to a whole nother level right now, we have to give credit to men. We can't no longer say that men are holding us back. They're not. They're championing us. They're hiring us in the NBA. They're hiring us in the Big Three. They're hiring us in corporate America. They're hiring us in TV. every big job that I've ever had in my life, I've been hired by men. You know, jobs that allowed me to be a, whatever you call me, a pioneer or barrier breaker. But once you get those opportunities, you have to be ready for your moment. And that's what coaches do. They prepare you for your moment so you can have success. And then, you know, responsibility and opportunity is a two-way street. And you have to have, you know, even the perfect pancake has two sides. Coaches coach, players play. You know, players determine probability and outcome. So you have a say in what happens in your program, or, you know, how your teammates play. You know, Marianne Stanley, I remember it was after my my sophomore year at Old Dominion. We had won the NIT, and she sat me in the office. She had the guts to look at me as an All-American player, which I'm so grateful, because, you know, I'm a little bit of an alpha, those of you who know me. And Marianne says, do you make you good, or do you make people around you good? And I just looked at her like, oh, I make everybody good. And then I had to stop and think, do I really? But she challenged me. And she challenged me to be a better person, a better player, a better teammate. And it changed my whole life. But, you know, we need people in authority. It's not a bad thing if a coach says, hey, you got to get in shape, or we're going to have to run a little harder. And sometimes today's athletes take offense to that. And we can't take offense to everything. At some point, you have to have, you know, some acceptance that, you know, you have to be on this team, you have to bring something to the party. And I probably went in a different direction, but that's how I feel.
That was a good direction. That was a really good direction. Sports teach, the one thing that I think that I learned in sports is it teaches you to be timely, to be responsible, but the one thing that I loved is after I was a student athlete, I didn't get physically punished for doing those things, so it was a breeze after that, right? You don't have to run, I don't have to get on the line, this is great. Donna, Nancy mentioned the fact that men, a lot of the time, would hire her, but you actually hired Jody, so why did you think that it was important to hire a woman as a college basketball coach?
One of the things that people don't realize is that prior to Title IX, 90% of all the coaching jobs in women's athletics were held by women. And one of the reasons why that was true is because no one paid them to be coaches. They were physical education teachers who volunteered to be coaches. As soon as money came into women's athletics, and as soon as women's athletics was put under the aegis of the male athletic director, we saw men's and women's athletic departments combined under the male athletic director. Then men went after paying jobs, and college athletic directors and high school athletic directors hired people who looked like them and they were comfortable with, and people that they had relationships with. It's technically called homologous reproduction, that you continue this power structure by hiring people who are just like you. And that's what Title IX has not changed. We've opened the doors for athletes to play sports, but we're still looking at 80% of all athletic directors in the United States are men, and they're predominantly white men. At 80% of all coaches in men's and women's sports are men, predominantly white men. And we're looking at 50% of all the coaches in women's sports being men, and 97% of all the coaches in men's sports are men. That's how you get to 80% of all coaches when you do the math. So there's these lost generations of women coaches because we still are seeing employment discrimination. So don't think that Title IX has done its job. It has not. Women are still behind the 8 ball. As athletes, we're at the high school level, we're 1 million opportunities short of gender equity. At the college level, we're about 300,000 opportunities short of gender equity. At the college level, we're $1 billion short every year in athletic scholarship entitlements that aren't being given to women. And this may sound like, bad news, but the point is, after 50 years, we should be there. And we're not, because We're not, because there is no enforcement on the part of the Office of Civil Rights. And contrary to the Renaissance man that Nancy has been privileged, men that Nancy has been privileged to know who hire her, most men in college sports in particular are protecting turf, are out to protect their salaries and the salaries of coaches of men's teams, and they're still giving women coaches and women's teams short shrift. That's what has to change.
Boy, if that doesn't get you fired up.
I was going to come.
That's great.
I was actually going to come to you next, Sylvia, because I wanted to know, obviously there's this inequity, and being a former coach, a player, why is it important for a woman to be in that role as a women's basketball head coach?
Well, to be a role model, I think, more than anything else. But first of all, you know, women should have the opportunity to coach their sport. Just like Nancy, you play your whole life, you know, and you go to college, you play, and then you get out. Some of them are fortunate enough to go to the WNBA or maybe go overseas and play. But then they want to coach the sport that they love, and there's no entry level for that. I noticed this several years ago, and I actually wrote a proposal to the NCAA, and they have worked on it. It hasn't become a rule yet, but I wrote this up because I know that the NBA has they call it a pipeline, a developmental pipeline and majority of the NBA coaches have come through that pipeline that they have. So I wrote that up and actually modeled it behind the NBA, and it was for former players to enter coaching. Could only be there a couple years, but they could go out and do everything, and then they move on and get coaching jobs. Because, you know, when I was, you know, Division I coach, I had a position open. I couldn't hire someone without experience. I had to hire somebody that had experience, but then how are they going to get the experience, you know? So I think that, you know, we need to provide more opportunities for women to not just participate, of course we know those numbers are up, but to have careers in the sport that they love and in coaching. The numbers have gone way down in the number of women that are coaching now. This year, like you mentioned, there's more than like 50 positions open, head women basketball positions open this year. And many of those are being filled by men's coaches. And don't get me wrong, I'm not opposed to men coaching women. My husband he coached women's basketball for 25 years at 3 different schools, but he, along with me, agreed that a female athlete should have the first opportunity to coach their sport. And I think without a doubt but like, you know, all the stuff that Donna said, I mean, she gets me so fired up. Every time I talk to her, she just gets me going. You know, the men, the athletic directors, they're hiring who they're comfortable with. And I've actually heard the saying that sometimes they don't want to hire women because they don't want to deal with female issues. You know, hey, come on. Get in the real world, you know? But the women are just not having the opportunity, especially to enter coaching. And that's not just in basketball. It's in volleyball, it's in softball. You think about all the sports and everything, and you think, okay, well, they got a good coach, they got a male coach, but how many of the players that play there would love to have that job and love to coach, and they're not having the opportunities to do that?
You know, I'd like to follow up on what you guys are talking about. I think the NBA model is the model that we should take a look at, because you don't get a job these days on a resume. You get a job these days on relationships. And if we have the men's athletic department and the women's athletic department, you have created segregation. So there is no way you're going to create those relationships and build friendships where somebody might want to hire you. And what the NBA has done, and I wish the NCAA would do this as well, and bring people together and have that same type of coaching, front office, analytics, you name it. And, you know, Adam Silver and the NBA have done an incredible job of bringing people together, and that's why you're seeing more women of color being hired in the NBA as GMs, assistant coaches, player development on the business side, because the men that have the power to hire are getting to know those young ladies and they're championing their hire. And I don't see that, you guys can help me, on that NCAA side, but I don't see that. I see it as here and here, and it will never come together if we're segregated. Rick Carlisle, who's the president of the NBA Coaches Association, he's phenomenal. He knows. I was in the meetings with him, and he looked at all those men, assistant coaches, PD coaches, all the analytics guys, and he said, women are coming. They're going to be here. You better be ready, because they're good, they're ready, they're making relationships with people in the league, and if you're not on top of your game, they're going to take your jobs. And it's happening right now, and we have to keep, putting more women in that pipeline so they get the, availability to know the guys that are going to make the hiring. Because I agree with you. I don't like the numbers that, Donna Lopiano threw out. It's not fair, but you also have to tell people what you want. And, I've been around this game a lot. People have been so nice to me. And in 2014, I called Pat Riley and I said, Pat, I really feel like I'm ready. I'm ready for that next step. And the first word out of his mouth, he goes, Nancy, I'm not a mind reader. You have to tell people what you want. And he was absolutely right. I never really told anybody what I wanted. I just assumed they would know that I was interested in coaching. He said, I thought you were happy doing TV. And I said, no. He goes, well, now that I know, now I can be an advocate for you. So if there are women and you're listening, you have to tell people what you want. You have to integrate yourself. Amber Nichols, who's the first female GM of an NBA G League team with the Washington, the Capital City Go-Go. Sometimes you just have to volunteer, you have to intern, and you have to work your way up the system. And she did that in Washington, and I'm so proud of my sister for doing that. And she made history, and now she's bringing more women and showing more women what they can do. It's like Morgan Tuck. There's no reason why she can't be a GM in the NBA one day if she so chooses to follow that path. So we have responsibility, but we have to also work that system.
One more thing here, now I'm going to stop. But the expectations for men's coaches and women's coaches is different. A male coach of women's basketball can coach a certain way, behave a certain way on the bench, have certain conversations, and that's okay. If a female coach does that, then that's not right. She gets evaluated, gets called in. I mean, really, that's the comparisons of behaviors of the female coaches and the male coaches. It's different. I mean, really, you can compare it in many, many situations, and that's not fair.
Yeah, that definitely needs to change. You guys both mentioned something that made me think of Becky Hammon and the fact that she obviously was in the NBA and then decided to go back to the WNBA. One of the things that a lot of people were talking about during that transition was whether or not her as a head coach in the W was going to allow her to eventually become a head coach in the NBA. But she's like, no, this is where I want to be, this is my home. How do we change the mindset of people to understand that, like, the WNBA is not a stepping stone? That's where people want to be. I don't know who wants to answer that question, but if anybody has any thoughts on that.
I think what Becky did was fantastic. Becky's a really great friend. I'm so proud of her. But she was ready for her moment. She was ready for her flowers. She had paid her dues, she had grinded, and there was a wonderful opportunity to coach in the WNBA. And you can see what she's doing right now, with the Aces. And if somewhere down the road, Becky does have an offer to come back and be a head coach in the NBA, she will have erased that box that a lot of NBA people said she had not been a head coach, and she will now have that on her resume. Right. But that's not why she went. And I'm not telling you, putting words in Becky's mouth, but that's what she said. She truly loves women's basketball, women's sports. It's been a life changer for her, and she's giving back to the sport that gave her so much.
I want to go to your time at Old Dominion. I know we talked about it a little bit.
Were we on probation?
What do you think the discrepancies between what the men were getting and the women were getting were when you were a player there?
I am starting to feel like I'm the wrong person to be on this panel. No, and I say that a little, tongue in cheek because, we were really fortunate at Old Dominion, and we were kind of on that cutting edge of, we were the first team to play in the national championship games when we won in '79 and '80 on live TV. Everything else, I think, was tape delay prior to that, if I recall. We had a very progressive athletic director in Dr. Jim Jarrett. He wanted equality. He wanted us to have nice uniforms. He wanted us to have the correct practice times with the men's basketball team. We were very close with our brothers on the men's team. We were family. And, Dr. Jarrett was making sure that money was funneling to women's basketball in our travel. When I got there, they had this big thing. It looked like a limo with all these doors. I mean, it looked like, a hearse, and everybody piled in and drove. And I was like, this is how you travel? The guys are flying to their games, and we're in these cars. It was unthinkable to me at that time. And he changed that. And, Donna and you guys, I don't really, at that time, know how the budgets were divvied up. But Dr. Jarrett did make sure that we had equality. We had nice uniforms. Like I said, we traveled on airplanes. We were playing in Madison Square Garden 3 of the 4 years that I was there. I'm not saying it was 100% equal because we didn't have equality in scholarships and we did not have equality in budget. But he did everything in his power to give us that feel that we were not second class. So we never thought we were second class. And then, when we go and we win and, we go 125 and 15 in our, 4 years, we felt like champions because we were treated like champions. And I think that's a really important mindset to have. And I know that didn't happen at all schools, but it sure did happen at Old Dominion.
But I think the point has to be made that your experience was the exception rather than the rule. And we still see this, that there's a bone being tossed to women's sports when at many schools, women basketball players, one women's team or one women's basketball team and a volleyball team are treated like queens, while 125 football players and 12 men's basketball players are treated like kings. Add up the numbers, right? 30 versus 150 doesn't cut it. But that's the game that's being played out there now. They'll have some token examples of, we treat our women this way. We fund them as well as our men, but it's a small number of women. And the rest is hidden from the public. And that's why discrimination is so hard to confront, that its laws do not eliminate discrimination. It drives discrimination underground. Discrimination becomes more artful, and then transparency becomes critical. But very few programs are transparent in terms of their treatment of women. You started this by saying, how come kids today don't know about Title IX? I don't know of an athletic director who wants to teach about Title IX to kids or coaches, because they know darn well that they are out of compliance with Title IX. We're looking at 90% of all college and high school athletic programs not being in compliance. So who is going to teach? The female coach or the parent or the student. It certainly is not the athletic director in the current system.
Wow, that's actually... Obviously, because there are these huge discrepancies, something needs to change. But as you said, it just drives discrimination underground. How do we change that?
There is a solution, and the solution is this. The Office of Civil Rights and the Department of Education does not have the energy, money, or staff to enforce all federal laws under the aegis of the Office of Civil Rights: sexual harassment, race discrimination, gender discrimination. That means somebody else has to enforce it. Congress could pass a law tomorrow that says any college or university that is a recipient of federal funds has to have, if they have an athletic program, they have to be the member of a conference or a national governance organization that requires Title IX compliance as a condition of membership, as a condition of access to postseason championship play. If we had a rule like that, then the Governance Association would have a system like the NCAA has a system right now to every 3 to 5 years, there's a rule that every institution has to assess its NCAA rules compliance system. That an outside third party has to come in and make that assessment. What if the assessment was a Title IX gender equity assessment, which they would have to put in place if there was a condition that you had to be in compliance with Title IX. There has to be some mechanism to assess compliance. And very few people know that the NCAA had such a system up until 2011 and then got rid of it because they were afraid that all of those reports of Title IX assessments were discoverable for lawsuits, were available to the press under FOIA requests. And since 2011, we've seen a steady progress in terms of burying data on athletics gender equity. And if anybody's going to do it, Congress is going to have to ring this bell in terms of enforcement.
So let me ask a question. So if federal funding, those 37 words, and there's no mechanism for compliance with what you said to solve that problem, then we will never be able to hold college football accountable for where funding goes to them. And in my opinion, you're pitting minorities against minorities. Men's minor sports and women's sports are fighting for whatever is left if the Office of Civil Rights, or like you said, there's not enough people hired to make sure that there is compliance. How is that going to ever change if nobody holds somebody accountable?
But the accountability is Congress saying that you will not get $130 billion a year in Higher Education Act funding if you are not the member of a governance organization that has this as a condition of membership. The NCAA has no requirement of any of its members that they have to do anything in terms of gender equity. Zero, zilch. And there is precedent for this. About 20 years ago in the state of Kentucky, Kentucky passed a law that said in order for a high school athletic program, all these teams to be eligible for postseason play, state championships, that they had to be in compliance with Title IX. And they charged the State High School Athletic Association with assessing compliance once every 5 years. And because both men's and women's teams would be kicked out of eligibility for postseason play, whenever Kentucky found that there was noncompliance, boom, it got fixed like that. Because they wanted their men to be able to play in a state championship, or every one of their teams to play in a state championship. And that's the kind of mechanism that has to be put in place so that it's compliance is not dependent on money, throwing money at the staff at OCR to assess programs, that it becomes a normal accreditation type program that higher education institutions are used to.
So we've got to figure out how to have Title IX enforced. It's a great law, and we've come a long way. It's helped us a lot, but we're to the point now where if it was enforced, probably 90% of the problems and issues and all that we're talking about would not be there if Title IX was enforced.
Absolutely. I want to go back to something that somebody said a while ago, because you mentioned equity in sports, and one of those things that is completely not equal is the pay, right? The pay that women make compared to the pay that men make. And usually it's because they justify it with saying that men's basketball is revenue generating, so it's not the same as women's basketball, which, okay. But why is pay equity so important? Jody, I'll ask you.
You know, as I sit here, I'm hearing Nancy's story, and it sounds like in some circumstances we're doing great. I know Donna really well, and I know that what she says is the reality of what we're dealing with today. And I'm going to go away from your question for a minute and say we don't have many ways of enforcing Title IX unless each of us in our various and sundry positions hold our institutions, high school, junior high, college, wherever it might be, unless we try to hold them accountable. We have to be allies for what we have worked so hard to achieve. And yes, Nancy, we need men to be our allies. We need men who believe in that, but it is ultimately our responsibility to do what we can do to change the environment we're in. And it's hard. It is difficult. I can speak from experience. Donna was at the University of Texas, and she built a tremendously strong women's athletic department. We won multiple national championships in a multitude of sports. But when she left, she barely got out the door before she sued us. Why? Because she knew what the reality was. And I think it had a huge impact. If the University of Texas was not doing enough, then what was everyone else facing? So it's unfortunate that we sometimes have to resort to extreme measures, but we must make changes in our environment that we influence. And I wish we all had the advantages that the NBA has with the resources and the will to make changes. But realistically, that's not where most of us sit. And it is going to be hard issues and hard questions asked for us to move to where we want to move. Why do women not coach in the numbers that men do? When money gets involved, it changes everything. Donna made that point early. She said when coaches weren't paid to coach, women volunteered for those jobs. As soon as money became a factor, then men who were qualified and who wanted those jobs emerged, and yes, they were hired by other men. We have to have women in leadership roles, and we have to work toward that every day, and then that gives us the power to make changes. Not everyone sits at the University of Texas or at even Old Dominion or North Carolina. They sit in very diverse and different environments that they work in, and everyone in this audience, I would assume, is committed and would love to be in an environment where there is equal opportunity and equal recognition and equal salary and all the things that we strive for. But it's sort of unrealistic to think that we can do it with a federal law, that we can do it one by one unless we make the commitment to do it. I don't have the answers. I only can say that all of us recognize the importance of providing opportunities for young women. And if you're in an environment where you have influence over that, then it is your responsibility, as it's mine and everyone else who believes in that principle, to do what they can do to make it better. And I think Donna's right. I don't think any of us have reached the point where it is where it needs to be. How did we get where we are? Baby steps that we continue to have to take, and we cannot take steps back if we intend to get to where and reach our goals. So I just think it's on all of us, and we all can do something to improve and to move forward, and only through that collective effort can we really do it.
But you know, whenever a coach files a complaint of Title IX, then they usually end up losing their job, and then they will, because they filed a complaint, they will not get another job. I know there's a lot of female coaches that say, you know, this is my situation, but I'm afraid to complain or say anything because I've got to have a job. You know, this is my career, and I've got a family to feed and all. So, you know, they just don't do anything and live in the conditions that they're in because of being afraid of not getting a job. And the women, when they do, they won't get another job, at least for a while. Now the men, they get a job right away. But the women coaches, will not get a job if they file a complaint. So again, there's a situation that is a Title IX.
And we all have to be aware that even though there are two ways to change large bureaucracies, tried and true ways. One is public embarrassment through media exposing something, embarrassing like gender inequities. The second is lawsuits. But both of those things are one-shot deals. They're very expensive when it comes to lawsuits. And as I hope all of you realize, that not only are coaches afraid to bring lawsuits or complaints because there will be retribution, parents and players themselves will not do so because they're afraid their children will suffer retribution. And kids are in the worst position to raise these issues because they're afraid of loss of coach's attention, loss of a starting position, non-renewal of a scholarship. So the answer has to be a public policy, legal one, in order to take the onus off of individuals who are at risk. And that's why I think Congress is so important right now, that if we're going to do something as individuals, it's right to our Congress people and say we need a system that puts the onus on the Governance Association to do the evaluation of assessment of gender equity, not have the individual be responsible for that function.
When's the march?
I want to say something about that. Everybody here is telling you the truth. It's 100%. I mean, they're not making this stuff up. But I will say this, that you can't exhale. We've come a long way in women's sports from, when I played in college or when, our esteemed panel was coaching or administrating. But I know we're not there yet. And a lot has to be done, and a lot of this is a political situation, as Donna is just so versed on all the nuances of what has to happen with government support, with law. But I will say this, we're making progress. We're making progress. Tonight, we're sitting here at the Basketball Hall of Fame at Symphony Hall, 5 women who are telling their story, an incredible moderator. We have women who are making, I don't know exactly how many women in college basketball are making over $1 million, but we've increased pay. So I'm gonna take the glass a little half full from my perspective and say that we can't stop fighting for our rights. This has to be a collective movement, and we have to continue to understand the issues, because I learn every time I'm around, Jody or, Donna. I learn every time I'm around, these guys. So you have a responsibility. We all have a responsibility, but it's not dire. Things are changing, things are happening, and we have to continue to have a movement, as Sylvia is saying. We are strong, we are powerful, and we can evoke change, but you have to believe it. Because if you don't believe it, nobody else is going to believe it. So, when you do get a job, lift when you rise, take somebody up with you, give somebody else that job, empower women who are qualified for that next level. And men have done it for years. They called it, the old boys network. And, I'm not saying, don't hire a male, but you know what? There's a girls' network here too, and we should give each other the opportunity to go to a different level when it's available to us.
Can we go back to your compensation question?
Right.
I think the compensation question is really important. I want to make 2 analogies. Mm-hmm. Most of you have heard of the new name, image, and likeness rules, that athletes now are not being prohibited from outside employment, not controlled by their institutions, but they can go into the marketplace and they can earn money based on their notoriety. They can monetize their name, image, and likeness. It is not true that women are getting an even shake on this. and that's a myth. We can point to anecdotal evidence of some women really making out like bandits, but the bulk, the data shows us now that the bulk of the resources are going to men's football. Women's basketball is outperforming men's basketball, but think of the numbers difference in terms of the amount of money going into football as this piece. But what I want to point out is the monetization of your NIL depends on whether your institution has been equitable in promoting you like men. So when we don't publicize women's events, when we don't promote women's events, when we don't enable women to have a brand, to be on television like men, and to develop their brand, we have devalued them in the open marketplace. The same has been true of women coaches. If Jody's program is not on television, or Sylvia's program is not on television, and people don't know how good she is, and if the institution doesn't promote the booster club for Jody's program and for Sylvia's program and bring in the money and do all the things that were necessary to develop men's sports, if that doesn't happen, then they justify lower compensation for a Jody or a Sylvia. It all backs up to whether the institution is treating women in the same way as men at the very beginning, not at the, oh, when I'm coming to sign you for being a coach, right? Am I offering you a good salary? Does that make sense to everybody?
Yeah.
And so we're seeing the depression of women's salaries because at the beginning we're not treating anything in women's sports like men are being treated.
Thank you guys so much for chatting. Welcome, everyone. Okay, Morgan, I'm going to start with you because we were talking a little bit at the powwow and dinner and just talking about how much we knew about Title IX when we were growing up. So how much did you know about Title IX as you were coming up?
Honestly, I didn't know a lot. You know, Title IX, luckily I was fortunate to be born after Title IX when it was in place. And so I never thought about it. I didn't think about, you know, the lack of opportunity or resources. I felt like I was just really fortunate. You know, when I wanted to start playing basketball in 3rd grade, you know, what got me started in basketball, we got to do a project on anyone that we wanted to, and I picked Lisa Leslie. And I got to read a book about her and her story, and I was like, oh, that's how I want to be. That's what I want to do. And I wanted to play basketball, and I knew in 3rd grade, I wanted to be a WNBA player, right? Even the fact that there was a WNBA, right? I had something to look forward to. And so even though I didn't have to think about Title IX, I definitely reaped the benefits.
Tara, since you're still coaching, I'm going to ask you about current student athletes. How much do you feel like your women are aware of Title IX?
I'm not sure that I'm not sure that anyone on our team really understands Title IX, but I'm going to ask them when I go back. I'm going back tomorrow. And that's going to be one of my questions to our team, and I'll get back to you. I would say maybe half will know Title IX. So I just want to give a shout out to everyone being here. It's really great to see you all, and I'm really glad during the intermission that my cousin who's sitting out there did not leave. Thank you, Carolyn. And it's really my cousin.
They can't leave before you come up here. Okay, Cheryl, I'm going to ask you this question because, as we mentioned, not that many people knew about Title IX. How much were you aware about Title IX before 1980?
Not at all. The only thing that was on my mind, I knew I was going to be the best player in the world, which I am. Just kidding.
Goated. I said you were goated.
But it wasn't until I got to USC, Linda Sharp sat all the freshmen down and started explaining Title IX. And then I realized there's no way in the world I could have afforded to go to USC. So then I started thinking about, wow, how big is this? So I really tried to be an advocate. And so we tried to pass it down. That's the only thing I would love is that coaches, administrators, AD would sit down and teach these young ladies what Title IX means and the opportunities that it has afforded us.
Christina, could I just, at our basketball camp with our little 8-year-olds, 50, and they started basketball camp today, I'll go back tomorrow, I'll have a room of 50 8-year-olds and I'll tell them, You know, when I was growing up, I didn't play basketball because there weren't teams for girls. I didn't go to basketball camp. There were no scholarships. There's no games on television. I go through this whole litany. And at the end, one little 8-year-old raises her hand and says, why was it like that? And I don't really know how to explain it to them. So I say, well, can anyone else answer that question? And another little 8-year-old raises her hand and goes, sexism. So, you know, these are 8-year-olds. These are 8-year-olds.
Wow, that's crazy. I actually was having a conversation with Sylvia when we were in the green room, and she said that because a lot of people aren't aware of Title IX, that the language has to change. What we need to use instead is like gender equity and that kind of stuff, because people understand that more than they do Title IX. So, I mean, sexism is another word that I feel like younger generations definitely understand, and they don't understand exactly what Title IX is. I want to go back to you, Cheryl, because we saw a couple of years ago the discrepancies between men's and women's basketball players in the NCAA tournament. When you go back to the 80s, what do you remember about the discrepancy between
I
men's
was
and
absolutely
women?
furious. And it all comes down to the weight room. I'm looking at the men's basketball team. The weight room was awesome. It had every piece of equipment. Now, the women that they sent to the weight room had a basketball, maybe some weights, hand weights, maybe some rubber bands and everything else. It was deplorable. And I'm so glad that they stood up and said something. And once the NCAA, Tari said it, oh, no, it was Tari, it was one of the players up here said, it isn't until, it was Donna, it isn't until you embarrass them on television, the media gets a hold of it, that it changes. And we have to be more, you know, proactive. And if we don't like something, say something.
Right. Right. I mean, I think social media definitely changed that. And like you said, the media picked it up. And Carol, I'll ask you this, because obviously the media was a huge part of forging the machine of letting everybody know what was going on and the discrepancies, even though they had been going on for so many years, that they're the same exact discrepancies. How do you feel like the media will start to change the coverage of women's sports and women's issues in sports?
Well, we've seen some changes already in the green room we were talking about. There's more opportunities for women's sports to be seen on ABC, ESPN for the national semifinals of basketball. But we're not seeing in the sports media day to day where Sports Center, you know, I would hold my breath and just pray that a WNBA game with only 2 turnovers and 3 dunks and 4 overtimes makes it to air. And that's just not right. And so what we need to do is see something, say something, demand it. There's a pledge going on right now for everybody in this room, all of us, called Demand 9, Demand IX. And I encourage all of you to get up online and just make the pledge. We're not asking for donations. We're not asking for your email, your text. We're asking you to demand 9. And if you see something, say something. And who you vote for, who's in Congress, who's the president of your Board of Education, you better know, because you better demand 9 for all of our kids. Whatever a little boy has, I want the little girl to have the same. And it's equality for all. That's all Title IX is.
How do you think, because as we were talking earlier, the number of, if you compare student athletes and men's student athletes in sports to the women, that number obviously isn't equal. So how do you think that media coverage becomes equal, knowing that there's so many more male student athletes and male athletes than there are women?
I don't know if that has anything to do with it. I think it has to do with the fact that for years it was always a chicken before the egg. And if you see women's sports and you have the opportunity to be in absolutely fabulous TV windows in prime time, and it rates. It's proven. I also often say, if you build it, they will come. Mm-hmm. And when we do build it, they do come. Look at USA Soccer. Look at women's basketball. Look at the WNBA. The demand is there. Since Title IX's only been around for 50 years, you think it would be time. And I don't know if it has anything to do with the fact that boys play more sports than women. Mm-hmm. I think it has to do with the sales aspect. And we need people like Gatorade that are now switching their buy to women's sports. And we need the WNBA and their voices to demand social justice. And we need all of things to click in and get the media to embrace women's sports. And we just have to demand it.
I feel like that's what we have seen, as you were mentioning how much it's growing. even the numbers when it comes to the WNBA and the coverage, and seeing that, you know, we're actually getting these games on ABC and ESPN, and how many people are watching it. So it's like, hey, it's not because people aren't watching it, it's because you guys aren't allowing people to actually watch it. Tara, I want to talk to you because you played a significant role in one of women's basketball's watershed moments in the 1996 gold medal winning USA women's Olympic basketball team. So this is almost 25 years ago. What was your experience with that?
I thought you were going to talk about me guarding Nancy Lieberman to put her on the Olympic team. I think she had like 37 points against me, but you know, I had the opportunity to coach the Olympic team in 1995-96, and it was a fabulous experience. I had to resign from Stanford, and we traveled all over the world. And this is one of the things that I think as Americans, and most of us probably in this room are Americans, you know, going around the world as, like, they don't have a Title IX in Russia. They don't have a Title IX in China, and we really are leaders of the world with our women's athletics. As women, just women, we would have come in fourth as a country in terms of the medal count at the Olympics. So, I mean, what we have done with Title IX has produced these great athletes. And with the Olympic team in '96, we had not won the gold medal in 1992. So USA Basketball put together a great program. It was a very demanding program. We ended up winning 60 games and won the Olympic gold medal in 1996 in Atlanta. And I think that was something that helped launch the WNBA and the ABL at the time. But I think more importantly, it really generated a lot of enthusiasm worldwide for women's basketball. We traveled to Russia. We were in China, Australia, all over the world. And it really was an exciting trip and exciting opportunity, I think, for women's basketball and for us as Americans.
I want to follow that up because I was a sideline reporter with NBC, and I won a gold medal in '84, but the team that you assembled and the shape that they were in, that's the reason that the WNBA exists. You did a great job. Great job, Tara.
Knowing what Tara was talking about, how, you know, other countries don't have a Title IX, and that's kind of why we're able to be leaders when it comes to that. Morgan, I'll ask you this. What do you think are the ripple effects of Title IX?
I think the biggest ripple effect is just opportunity. You know, I think for my generation of players, you know, it kind of turned from where I would call being grateful for the opportunity to expecting it, right? Like, it's not, like when I was coming up in high school, I didn't, like what the first panel was talking about of, you know, your whole team not being on scholarship, right? That wasn't even a thought. It wasn't a second guess. It was like, okay, I'm gonna work really hard. As long as I get good enough, I'm gonna get a scholarship. I didn't feel like the thing that would hold me back would be my gender, right? So I think our generation is more, and those ripple effects are that we know that those opportunities are there, and in a sense, I think they're taken for granted. I was able to go a couple weeks ago to a Title IX event at Gillette Stadium where Billie Jean King spoke, and one thing she said that really resonated was like, we can't be comfortable because it's not set in stone, right? Title IX isn't here for good and there's nothing else. Like, it can be taken away, just like other things. And so I think that's also a ripple effect where, because we've had those opportunities, because we've had so much success with Title IX, I think sometimes my generation doesn't think that, like, we know that there's growth and there needs to be improvement, but we don't think about the fact of, we kind of take it for granted in a sense, and we've benefited a lot from that, but at the same time, we have to make sure that we're in the moment and still pushing the movement forward at the same time.
Kara, I'm going to ask you this, because when you think about ripple effects and what Title IX has done for women's sports, what do you see as the future of women's sports, especially when it comes to media coverage and how people view and audiences view women's sports?
Well, I'd love to see more on TV, and I'm going to be part of launching a women's sports network, so that's coming. There's some fabulous stories that are not being told at all that could be told. I think our 30 for 30 film was it the first female sports documentary produced at ESPN. So that's just, I couldn't believe that stat. That's just unbelievable. So there's more stories to be told. I think that the talent on the court has improved immensely. And it's not just basketball, it's softball, it's, you know, lacrosse is growing. So I think just the growth is here. We need to keep it going. Title IX could go away. I'd love to see our professional basketball players stay in the States in the off season. I'd love to see that fixed. I'd love to see our WNBA players on charter planes. What do you think of that? Yeah. Long legs, knees.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. You know, the fact that they have to travel from Seattle to Connecticut Sun, we hope this year, for the championship game and not be, you know, on a charter flight it's just crazy that this is still happening. So it's a long way to go. I'm hoping some of that changes will occur.
What are some of the changes that you feel like still need to be made, Cheryl?
I'm going to go a little off script. Yeah, I was right. The one thing that we need to do as women, coaches, players, the men do a great job of supporting each other. Now, they may have, you know, they may have risks and everything else, but they get over it. Women, we can be petty. We can be very petty, and we will not let we will hold on to something. So I would like to see more women being supportive. You don't have to like each other, but support each other. That's all I want to see. That's all I want to see. Right. And if we continue to do that, we grow. And we start adding and building on. I was very fortunate. I had Barbara Hedges was the Associate Athletic Director. And Barbara gave us anything we wanted. The men's basketball, we could play. So it was the opposite. Now, it helped we won 2 national titles, but the support was there before we ever stepped on the court. So I was fortunate.
Yeah. That thought made me think of something, because I feel like in a lot of industries, especially if they're male dominated, a lot of women feel like there's only a few spots for them and they need to compete against other women, or they need to not support other women so that they don't get, you know, it's a competition. They want those spots. Carol, I'll ask you this because I work in a male dominated industry, as do you. What has the experience been like for you? Because there's no Title IX in like the regular world when it comes to
in the business world.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a loaded question. A lot of things have changed. I'm going to be positive here. Like, we're seeing more women in the truck than ever before. We're seeing more women on the studio shows. Congratulations to you. We're just seeing more women in decision-making processes at ESPN. It wasn't easy. It took a long time. I always fought the battles that I knew I could win with a lot of facts and figures. I always stayed, I was always an advocate. I always fell back on my team sports and playing sports, and surrounded myself with both men and women that were smarter than me and made really good decisions. So I see it's changed. It was difficult. I never really got down on it. I always found a way to maneuver myself around, and you know, you always talk sports, so that always come in handy too.
Yeah. I asked Carol this a little bit ago, and I want to ask both Tara and Morgan this. What does the future of women's sports, how does that growth look to you?
I would say my first thought, obviously, it's very similar to what Carol had said about it being visible, right, and being on TV and easy to watch. But from in my role now with the Connecticut Sun, and I do a lot of different clinics and camps, for me the future is young girls basketball players knowing the past, because that's what I've seen the most, which I didn't realize. You know, if you ask about, you know, who certain players were that maybe weren't before the age of like social media, they have no idea. Right? They have no idea the players that came before, and I think missing that history is going to hinder the future, and it's not going to allow players to maybe reach their potential or have all the knowledge that they should. So I think in the future of having more knowledge of the history of the game, of recognizing those that came before, like I feel really honored to even be up here with all of you, right? Like you guys have paved the way for my generation and younger, and so I think being able to acknowledge that is going to be really important in the future.
You know, I'd like to think that we have a really bright future, but it really depends on all of us, as Jody already talked about, really, you know, staying in the fight, making sure that it is correct. And one thing I'd like to say is that one of the things the Women's Sports Foundation, and I know Donna's been associated with the Women's Sports Foundation as a director of it, there is a fund there, and it actually happens to be in my name. For those of you that have electric cars and you're not spending money on gas, you can give the money to the Women's Sports Foundation and help pay for a legacy fund, which is helping to get young women in all sports, not just basketball, internships. And it I think, is also what Nancy talked about, getting relationships, doing the work, volunteering, not getting paid a lot, but having the ability to see, in fact, you like it in sports. And I think going forward, in an ideal world, and if we could have a magic wand, it would be great to have men and women coach both men's sports and women's sports, and that men and women work well together and bring different strengths to a group. But right now, women are excluded from a lot of coaching opportunities and are excluded from, the jobs that now you're getting, which is great, GMs and things like that. And we need to bring more in and help develop and help mentor them. So, I thought you were on the panel just, to bring the age down, but, the average age. But, obviously you've got a great future, and we need more people like Morgan getting into college athletics and professional athletics and growing our game.
Let me just add something to the corporate vibe here. I would always encourage the women, when they were attending meetings with a client or an acquisition meeting, I would say sit at the table, don't sit in the background, just little things. And, ask to go to a meeting. And 99% of the time, the boss is going to say, sure, come along, yeah, no problem. So ask to be there, ask to be included.
Cheryl, I'll ask you this. How do you think Title IX, because we're talking about how we can bring women up into, be coaches, et cetera. How can Title IX trickle up into collegiate athletic departments and as athletic directors and stuff like that?
There are two positions, so we can trickle up: the president and the AD. If those two will get on the same page and support women's athletics, it will trickle up. But until that happens, we'll make, strides, but we won't trickle up as fast as we can.
One thing that I talked to Sylvia about in the green room was the fact that we've almost taken a step back. Where do you guys feel like we are currently when it comes to Title IX and women's sports and equity?
All right, I'm going to jump on this one. Last year at the NCAA tournament, it was really very disappointing to see the bubble. If people followed the NCAA women's tournament and the men's tournament, we were both in bubbles. And this disparity between the two tournaments was just mind-boggling to me, the amount of money spent on the men's tournament. And yes, the men's tournament does bring in money, but it was beyond that. And I think for a long time, the women's tournament has been viewed as a money loser. We've been called losers. We just didn't bring any money. And but on top of it, it wasn't just the weight room. We were being tested differently for COVID. In the meals, it was just really different in terms of the meals. And the NCAA kind of got called in on the carpet, and there was the Kaplan report. Roberta Kaplan's law firm did, I think, an excellent job reporting on the disparity. And so through that disappointment, I'm hoping that we've brought attention to it, and there has been embarrassment, as Donna pointed out, that we can go, we can look at things and say, why not make these changes that would be beneficial for everyone? Title IX is good for everyone. And a lot of times, Title IX has been used as a wedge between men and women to say that women's sports, if women's sports get something, that it's a zero-sum game, that men's sports will be cut out. And in fact, that has not been the case. Women's sports has grown through Title IX, but so has men's sports. And with this last, issue with the disparity that was shown through the Kaplan report and, through the coverage, I hope that we can make good progress going forward.
I think it's very interesting that you say that, because I feel like we see that in a lot of different areas when any kind of laws are passed or any type of something, is we're told to hire black people or hire more women. It's always, okay, well, the only reason that you got that opportunity is because this is in place. We were talking in the last panel about needing more changes to happen, but do you feel like that will be the conversation if those changes happen, that people will say, well, the only reason we're having this women's college basketball situation is because this new thing has been in place? How do we change that narrative?
I would say it's just kind of ignoring that. You know, I think when it's kind of, I think what Nancy was saying before is even if you get that opportunity, right, if it is because you're that diversity hire or you're the women's basketball team getting this because of Title IX, but you're ready for the moment and you make the most of it. And so hopefully you showing that you're ready for it, or that team showing that they can take that responsibility or make the most of the opportunity, leads to more opportunities.
Right.
And so even if that's the way to get your foot in the door or the way to get a department's foot in the door, I think the way you get there doesn't matter. I think as long as you get there and you make the most of it, and that's going to open doors for future generations as well.
Tara, I work with a few of your former student athletes, and they're great. And it's good to see how women have been able to infiltrate other aspects when it comes to the corporate world because they were former student athletes. Do you feel like there's a glass ceiling for women?
I don't want there to be a glass ceiling for women, but there's definitely something that's been holding women back, and it's something that I think we're all battling. You know, whether it's we've never had a female president in our country. You know, we're making changes, but the changes, and we're celebrating Title IX, but whether it's civil rights changes or just changes for women are slow in coming. And we have to, I think, as people, we have to respect people for what they can do, not their gender, not their color or anything like that, but what job can they do, and give them the opportunity to do well. So, is there a glass ceiling? Yes, but we're working to shatter it.
When you think about that, Cheryl, and think about the fact that we still have so much longer to go, even though it's been 50 years. Is there a way to speed up the process?
It's called support. And Morgan, I'm absolutely agreeable with that. Call me a token, but pay me. I could care less. Pay me. Give me the opportunity. Nancy said it well, too. If I get a job, I'm bringing somebody along. If she gets a job, I'm bringing her along. We just got to continue to support one another, because eventually we're going to break through. We've made great strides, but eventually we will break through.
One of the things that I don't think people talk about a lot, and I know we had a conversation about this at ESPN, is as women being in a very male-dominated industry, the pressure that comes along with wanting and trying to be able to succeed. Morgan, is there any pressure for you in the position that you're in, being a woman and knowing that you've gotten this opportunity?
I'm also fortunate. Both of my bosses are women, and they've been amazing and very supportive, and they've helped me in my transition. So I've been retired from basketball for about 1.5 years, and I didn't have corporate business experience before I got the job, and what was brought up in the first panel, that relationship factor, right? That's where I feel like that really helped me. But I do feel sometimes there is the pressure of you feeling like I have to prove myself to myself, right? And I think part of that is a transition of knowing that this is totally different than being out there running up and down the court, but those things that I learned as an athlete help, right? Because when I would think back to playing at UConn and those championship games, thousands of people, right? That's pressure, right? And you feel that, you have those nerves, but it's a different type of pressure. But I think those moments and those times that I had as an athlete, the different, injuries I've gone through, all those type of things have helped me in this role. So even if I do feel pressure, I go back to my athlete mind and I kind of use those things that my coaches told me or my teammates would say or different things like that. And I think that's helped me quite a bit. But I think there is some pressure, but I think that athletic side has helped quite a bit.
Tara, I want to ask you this because there are a lot of men that coach women's college basketball, and when women get opportunities, it's a lot more rare, especially when you were talking about earlier the fact that women should be able to coach men's just the same way that men are able to coach women. Why is it important that women are in those leadership roles?
I think that Jody talked about this a little bit, mentors, and you want to see someone that looks like you doing what you might want to do. And just the opportunity, it's a great job. I mean, coaching is a great job. It has become a great job. And it's fun. It beats working for a living. It's just really something that I would, it's something that for me, Title IX has really dictated the whole course of my life. And I'm so thankful for it. But, the opportunity to coach and the opportunity to play, obviously, I missed it for playing. But coaching is it's a great career. And it's something that I think we want to encourage women to be in. We want to mentor them. And, as Cheryl said, support them and keep women in. There's a lot of times women don't get a second chance. And that's something that is not really studied much. But, if a woman is fired, it's a woman can't do the job and maybe a man will be hired. Whereas a lot of times, guys will be fired and another guy comes right in.
Right. That's I think a little bit what I was touching on when I talked about that pressure, right? You know that if you don't succeed, that there's a chance that you will never get another opportunity. Cheryl, you said that's true. Where have you seen that happen?
With me. When I was coaching at USC, I was basically told, you got 3 years to get it done, to turn it around. And that's my alma mater. And I've never coached before. And the support outside of Barbara Hedges was not there. And I was taking over a position where Mary Ann Stanley, who was fighting to be paid equally with the men's coach, was let go. So they called me. I was like, fine, I'd like to try it. It'll be new. And what I found out is that I understand taking the job was hurtful for women's basketball. But what I did find out, there was a lot of people, a lot of women that supported me. And I was able to reach out, how do you do this? Well, when do you do this? How do you recruit? Who do you recruit? And a lot of women, not men, a lot of women stepped up to the plate and showed me that. And that's what we need to do, support one another. Whether you like it or not, support one another.
Just making sure I'm good on time. Good on time? We're good? I don't know. Okay, I'll just keep asking questions. When you think about, because it's been 50 years and there's still so much more work to be done, how much more work do you think needs to be done? Morgan, I'll start with you.
I feel like that's a little hard to answer, like exactly how much, but I feel like it's a lot, right? Like I feel like there's a lot of growth, and I wouldn't want to try to limit it, right? I think when I think of the men's side of sports, the potential is limitless, right? Like if you look back of 50 years ago for men's sports and where it is today, it's totally different. It's a totally different aspect. It's a part of culture. It's a part of the world's culture. That's a unifier is sports. And even my experiences of playing overseas and different things, men's sports are huge. It doesn't matter what the sport is. So I think for the women's side, it's of getting to that point where we don't view women's sports as women's sports. It's sports. It's basketball. It's softball. Or if it's baseball, it's sport, right? We don't have to differentiate to say, oh, well, I want to watch basketball or I want to watch women's basketball. Like it should just be one thing. And I think that's where it could possibly get to.
Carol, where in your mind do you think, what would be the marker for you to know that we don't have to keep constantly having these conversations about what we need to do in order to just make people care about this conversation?
Well, let me just step aside and say, when are women going to be paid the same amount as men? I mean, that's 96 cents to, and then, oh, or whatever. I don't really have an answer either. I just want change. I want it now. I want equality for all, and that includes sports. I want women to be seen. I want their stories to be told. I want their games to be documented equally. And we're not there, and I hope we get there soon. Because I'm getting gray hair like Tara.
I have gray hair too, you just can't see. Okay, before we start audience questions, I do want to mention, because Carol just reminded me, that ESPN had a new 4-part docu-series come out. It's called 37 Words, and it's about the history of Title IX. And I haven't watched it yet, but I did read the blurbs on each one. So it's going from the beginning of time before Title IX to now, even some of the issues that women are still going through at this moment. So it's a very good documentary. You guys need to watch it.
If I may, just quickly, tonight, programming alert, the first 2 episodes are airing on ESPN tonight, and then the second 2 episodes will air on the 28th of June.
Beautiful. Watch it. Okay, anybody have any questions?
Thank you all for being here. Amazing, amazing panel. My question is about the support of women in athletics and why good people, good women leave athletics, because it's a crazy kind of world. But what can we do in our positions to help great women stay in athletics? I mean, I'll use Cheryl Miller as an example. There is no reason that someone with Cheryl Miller's background, success, pedigree, that she is not coaching if she wanted to. We already talked, she don't want to.
There's no way I would coach. I will not try to coach anymore.
So maybe Cheryl's
It's
a man.
a different breed.
All right, here we go.
No.
Here we go.
No.
Bad example on Cheryl
I'm not
Miller,
the
okay?
one.
But the point is, we have great women who are not coaching. We have great women who are not aspiring to be ADs. We have great women who are not, because they're leaving the crazy world of athletics. How can we support women more or better in their careers so that they hang in there and stay, so that we can affect more change? Thank you. Oh, by the way, I'm Fran Harris, former athlete at Texas.
Why did you have to bring up Texas? Seriously, Fran? Enough with Texas.
Anybody have an answer for that one?
I agree with you 100%, and I really appreciate your passion for what you believe in. And we just have to continue to have moments like this where people hear our individual stories. At the end of the day, it comes down to the same thing. We want change. We want opportunity. We want equality. We want inclusion. Everybody uses those fancy words, you know, equality and inclusion. Well, to me, equality means you're inviting me to the dance. Inclusion means I want to dance, ask me. And we want to dance. We want to dance at the highest levels. And if Cheryl Miller wants to be a head coach in the NBA, in the WNBA, in college basketball, Cheryl, I am speaking right now. We talked about this. We talked about this before. You should get that. You have given your time, your effort, your expertise. You have given your love to this game, and you should have that opportunity. And that's, I agree 100% with Fran Harris.
Am I on? Just a thought. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, yeah.
Okay.
I hope you guys can.
Just a thought. There was a reason why the most successful women's sports programs at the beginning of Title IX were separate sex athletic departments. At Tennessee, at Texas, at the University of Iowa, at the University of Minnesota, Ball State, I can't even remember all 9 right now. When you separate the administration of men's and women's programs, you created an opportunity for women to support women. And that's what happened, that women were placed in charge of their own destiny. They didn't have the resources, but they developed the resources because they had the power to work toward them, to hire people like a Jody Conrad or a Pat Summitt or any of the really great coaches and people who made those programs great. That's not to say we have to have separate sex athletic departments, but look at corporate America. What corporate America does is when they have a structure that's a single structure, there always are 2 separate departments. One that takes care of marketing already developed products like men's sports, and another department that is research and development, that is out to develop underdeveloped products. So this side is putting all their eggs into 2 baskets, football and basketball. There is no research and development side that is investing in men's minor sports, that is investing in women's sports, that is trying to grow those things. So you're hearing me say that there are some structural solutions here that have to be explored, but none of that is going to happen if we continue to repeat the kind of leadership that's in athletics right now, which is male athletic directors who are perfectly happy with a big paycheck and just working on basketball and football and not doing the hard developmental work for these new products that should be developed.
Thank you, ladies, for coming here. I really enjoyed you. Morgan Tucker, it's good to see you again. I went to the Kara Walters camp back in middle school, being my counselor. So I'm going to my junior year of college now, and I played 12 years of basketball. But my question was for Miss Nancy. It was interesting how you said men have helped women in basketball. If that's so the case, how come women have to play overseas to make more money and work twice as hard and don't get, I heard you use the word equal, but I feel like it's equity, because women and men need different things. Women might need more support than men do, since they already get this support, and they need more resources such as Title IX. So I was just curious on your take on that.
Oh boy, great question. You know, Cheryl's still here and she's available.
I want to hear it from you.
You know, it is a wonderful question. I don't know if I have, you know, all the answers to the question, but I can say we all are in agreement that we would love to have the most talented women's basketball players in the world playing back here full-time, having the opportunity to make a living and to work on their brand. And everything is about, obviously, time and money. And I know that the WNBA Players Association is working really hard. The union is working hard with leadership of the WNBA and the NBA to increase the schedule, and hopefully in short order, and I don't know what that time frame is to be able to have our players maybe play a 50-game schedule in the United States like they do in the NBA G League. And maybe that would be a start to saying, you know what, we have more games, more sponsorships, more support. You know, the TV has increased, as Carol mentioned, exponentially, and a lot of that has been what she's done for the last 25 years behind the scenes to make that happen. So it's progress, but we are far from being there, and I would hope that, you know, in the near future, our players would not have to go overseas to play.
Nancy, could you imagine Steph Curry, LeBron James, Kevin Durant having to go to Italy just to make a living? Nope. And we have players, women players, that I hope you guys tune into that are fantastic. I know I could possibly hang with them a little bit, but they have taken women, well, basketball.
Cheryl?
What?
Come on.
Yeah, I am the greatest. But with that being said, the women that are playing right now and the women that are coming up are tremendous. And that's because we have great coaches, great coaches.
I mean, how many wins are on this panel here? Championships and wins and educators. And, you know, Cheryl and I were lucky, and Morgan, to have played this game. And, you know, now you're in the front office. You know, we have coached and are currently coaching, but really, we ride on your coattails. You know, I mean, everything you have given us is unbelievable. I mean, I would never have known anything about coaching if I didn't, you know, play for some of the great coaches, Hall of Famers. So, you know, thank you for what y'all have done for us.
Let me say something. I want to address the whole idea of how do we get more money for salaries for professional athletes. Think about it. Men's sports salaries are directly related to television rights fees. And showing the success of women on television is absolutely critical. And the system, the television system, has been stupid when it comes to women. ESPN had an opportunity under Bodenheimer to start the women's channel. And he was at the verge of doing it. And we ran into a really economic downturn and he didn't do it. But to consolidate all product on one channel and to prove ratings on that channel is critical. ESPN had another opportunity to do it when it started WESPN, right? But what did it do? It did not consolidate all women's product under WESPN. It left women partially on ESPN2, seldom on ESPN1. You could never know where the women's product was. How can you prove ratings? So this is a pitch for this new women's network that's coming out right now. It's going to be, and say a little more about this, Carol, in terms of free TV. If we can focus we're talking about support. If we can get everybody we know to watch that channel, because it's going to be advertising driven, because ratings are what determines the monetization of the value of that property. If we can really drive people to that channel, then we're going to do something in a capitalist society to change this paradigm. But why don't you tell us more about that channel?
So the channel coming is considered a fast channel, which means free.
We love free. We love free.
Advertising support television, and there's quite a few out there already. They're very niche channels, like an auto racing channel, a billiards channel, there's probably a sewing channel, comedy channel, and cornhole, right? And the distribution model is this, it's streaming. So some of you have Roku, some of you have Samsung smart TVs, some of you might have Pluto already, some of you might have Exmo. Those are the 4 distributors. And if we can get our channel launched on all of them, then Roku here and Samsung here and Pluto there, you're all going to see the same channel, all the same content. And on this channel is going to be women's sports only.
But 24/7?
24/7, it's going to have
All
documentaries.
sports.
All sports. We have some live hours. We have some Athletes Unlimited work. We have some surfing. And as soon as the rights become open again, then we hope to get our foot in the door and bring competition and demand for women's sports. So that's the goal.
Over here.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming out. Such an esteemed panel. My name is Joe Page. I have a question for you with regards to another group of folks who are also starting to have some issues as it relates to sports, transgender student athletes. So I would like to get into what your thoughts and opinions are in terms of their progress. Do you see it as an impediment to Title IX? And I'd just love to hear your opinion on that. Thank you.
Okay, it's a very volatile situation in terms of transgender because we're operating in the binary. There are 2 extreme positions. There is the far right, which is for total exclusion, participation in women's sports by birth sex, totally saying transgender girls are not welcome in women's sports. And then there's the opposite transgender organization position, which is total inclusion, identical treatment of transgender girls and women, even if they retain their post-puberty male sex-linked performance advantages. So we're at complete extremes. Nobody is talking about the middle ground solution. What is that solution? We have to recognize that Title IX happened, separate sex sport happened because we have an anti-discrimination law called Title IX, and there needed to be some exceptions to everybody being treated equally, that women could be treated differently than men. And we made 4 exceptions under Title IX. Religious institutions, medical research, pregnancy, and women's sports. Because women's sports is a physical skill, strength, speed, reaction time, physiology space. It's a test of physical and physiological ability. Post-puberty, at puberty, men start generating 27 times the amount of testosterone that women have. And that results in tremendous physical changes. Their bones are longer, their bones are denser, their hearts are larger, their lungs are larger, their windpipes, their trachea is larger. They can, breathe more. They have higher hemoglobin levels, which means they're going to be superior in aerobic activities, distance activities. All of these performance advantages are the result of puberty, and they are not replicable in terms of the immutable characteristics of the biological female sex. Women are, and every one of you who has ever grown up like all of us, playing against boys, beating boys, until we were 10 or 11 or 12 years old, right? Cleaning up in terms of competition against boys. All of a sudden, they hit puberty, and it's like you hit a wall. There is no way that you can have fair competition in that construct, which is why sport is separate. So what's the answer? Can you include transgender women under the women's sports umbrella and still guarantee fair competition? The answer is yes. Number one, we have to recognize that sport is 95% a social construct. It is non-competitive. It is practice, it's team meetings, it's being on the bus, it's the camaraderie we all talked about that is so important to the development of young women, to the development of transgender women who desperately need the reinforcement of their authentic selves as they are women in a gender identity sense. They need that social construct, and they should not be precluded from the women's sports social construct. The only thing that has to change about women's sport is to guarantee fair and safe competition for both, which means when it comes to the competition itself, they should be separately scored. And you're saying, oh my God, not treating them identically is going to make them feel bad. And you've heard that, well, transgender girls are going to be more susceptible to suicide because they're being rejected. They're not being treated equally. We do this in sport all the time. We prioritize fairness and safety and separate groups in order to guarantee fairness and safety. The 120-pound wrestler doesn't wrestle against a 175-pound wrestler. They both separately are scored. They both get championship trophies. The championship trophies are equally valued. The performances are equally valued. Separate does not mean less than. It means different from. So what we have to do in the women's sports space is to welcome transgender women, to separately score them, and to envision a space in which all kids understand that human differences are incredibly amazing. And we have to respect those differences. We have to acknowledge them, not hide them, and not say there's something that they're not, right? We have to be honest about them, and then we can accept it and operate in a place together where, I think we can have a very healthy and safe educational experience for all women.
Okay. Thank you.
I'm used to interpreting what Donna says. She says that there should be a third option, that they should not compete against women, but they should have an opportunity to compete in a separate division, however that looks.
Within women's sports.
Right, I'm okay with that.
Right. Exactly right. But this is a very big difference with what people are doing. When FINA, for instance, the International Federation for Swimming, just announced what Jody said, that there should be a third competitive category. There should be men, women, and then an open category. But that open category excludes transgender women from the social construct of women's sports. Right? So the distinction is, you've got to give transgender, if you believe in social justice, if you believe in honoring gender identity, you have to allow transgender women athletes to experience this camaraderie in the social construct of women's sports. It's a women's sports umbrella that has to be created.
Good evening. Thank you for being here in my lovely city of Springfield, which I live. I'm also an educator, and I find it very difficult, this is one comment, difficult when it comes down to finding pictures and media for me to put on my bulletin boards for my students to know about women and athletes. And I would like to see more, not just in basketball, but in wrestling, those who play golf, those who are tennis players, and those who are runners, and other sports besides those two sports. I agree with that on you. But my next question is, because I'm an educator and sometimes I like for my students to write to you, can some of you be one of my pen pals for my students?
Is there a question? Yeah. I believe she said she wants somebody to be a pen pal for one of her students.
Okay, thank you. My next question is real quick, though. What are you doing to help our athlete and our American who is still in Russia, and how are we getting her home?
Can you repeat that question?
Brittany Griner.
What are you doing, or what can be done to help our athlete who is in Russia to get home, and supporting her wife who is here in the United States?
I still didn't understand the question.
Griner.
I believe it was, what are you doing to support Brittany Griner?
Oh, Brittany Griner, okay.
In bringing her home.
Go ahead. No, Karen, no.
It's obviously a very delicate situation with our U.S. government, and I'm not sure that we have the permission or the right to really speak up and injure any opportunity for her to get home safely through the U.S. channels. So that's my thought. Anyone else?
Was your second part about supporting her wife?
Yes. Yes.
I think everybody supports her wife. I don't think anybody has a problem with her being married to a woman.
No, that's not my point. I just want to know, because you're saying through all your conversations says we need to support each other. And I was just wondering, have you do anything to reach out to her, to support her? That's my question.
I don't think Putin's allowing us to write to her. And I'm trying to be light of the situation, but it's an unfortunate situation. And all our prayers, everyone up here, we're praying for. Not only for her to come home, but while she's away, her mental aspect, her mental state. Pray for that she continues to be strong.
And I agree with that, and I've had a chance to talk, to her agent, and they're doing everything they possibly can. And the most important thing we can do on the outside is what Cheryl said, just pray for her. Her beautiful wife has had a tremendous amount of love and support, and I know they were trying to have that phone call connection, and they're hoping to be able to talk this week because it's been 4 months since she's been able to talk to her family. We want Brittany home, as fast as possible, and I know we hope our government can make that work. So that's all we can say at this time.
I wonder if I can just go back to the pen pal question, though, because it seemed like Nancy volunteered, but I think all of you should, if you're in the K-12 space, that you should make a connection with your local community college teams or your local four-year institution teams and ask them to be pen pals, to be local mentors to your program. Okay.
I've done that, though.
And I'll give you Cheryl's cell number if you need it, okay?
Okay, why are you always trying to throw me under the bus?
These are our last three questions. We'll go on this side.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ava. I currently go to a D1 school. I go to Belmont University down in Nashville, Tennessee. And I noticed we have an amazing, amazing women's team who actually made the tournament this year and lost by like 2 points to UT Tennessee. It was traumatic for us. But I was wondering what I can do as a student to kind of pressure my school to give the women's team the same amount of support and, I guess, coverage within the school that they give the men's team.
Because of the risk that parents and students perceive in being outspoken about gender inequities, my advice would be to identify tenured faculty members on the campus of your institution who cannot be hurt, cannot be fired. There's usually a committee on women's issues that tenured faculty are members of, and have them be your voice so that parents and kids aren't at risk. And talk to them about raising these issues in the faculty senate, and that brings public embarrassment, pressure in terms of the institution. But I think that'll work if you'll play that game.
Yeah. Thank you.
Recently, you see even first-round picks in the WNBA getting cut. There's talk of expansion. I mean, there just seems to be not the rosters. When you look at them, they're just loaded with former All-Americans, and there's just no space for anybody. How important is it? I mean, teams are actually going from 12 players to 11 players, so that the better players can get higher salaries. How important is it that they go? I mean, they only have 12 teams versus, say, the NBA, 30 teams. What's the importance on that? And also, I have a question for you, for Carol. Is the women's network going to have its own sports center version? And are they going to have their own Stephen A. Smith, their own,
We're not that far.
their own talk shows, their own talk shows?
You know what? I think we got the Cheryl and Nancy show coming up.
Yeah, I mean, that would be, hey, put them on the air. So, yes, I mean, will there be that kind of programming as well as just
We're
showing
going to
games?
have, well, our studio daily show will be called Game On. It won't look at all like Sports Center, and we'll have talent and we'll have a guest seat. We're going to be different in a positive way. As regard to the WNBA, I'll take the first crack at this and then look at my fellows here. This happened back in the history of the WNBA and the ABL. And when the ABL didn't make it and folded, the WNBA launched a players' union. And they made Val Ackerman at the time and the WNBA expand into extra teams to help with the rosters from the ABL. So there's a little history here. As for regards to, I think the commissioner is going to expand. Most everyone in the third round of the WNBA draft don't play. They don't make the teams. So there seems to be an appetite for more players. But before they make that move, let's make sure they have the right cities. And people are supporting the games. How many have been out to the Mohegan Sun games? I mean, we need to support the teams. It's a business. So that's my reply. Anyone else?
Yeah, I'll add to that too. And I think in 2020 there was a new collective bargaining agreement that was agreed upon, and it had a ton of amazing benefits for the players that weren't there previously. But one of the downsides with the increase in salaries was that the new minimum veteran salary is higher, right? So the players that are offered their rookie contract, but not necessarily like the top players on the team, which won't be on those max deals, they're expensive to keep. So that's why you'll see some of those former first-round draft picks not on rosters, because if they're saying, okay, we have this hard salary cap, which means there's no wiggle room, right? Like you have a set number, you can't go over it. And so you find that a lot of those middle ground players that are in their maybe 5th to 8th year in the league, they're too expensive to keep. So a team can pay, a John Cole Jones or Alyssa Thomas the top dollars and then keep rookies or players from overseas, which you're seeing a bigger influx of that as well. And it's really just because they're obviously amazing players, but some are cheaper than others to keep on roster. So that's why you'll continue to see some of the rosters going down to 11 and sometimes 10 players, just because it's to have that salary cap space.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Last question.
Thank you for letting me have the last question. And just want to say thank you for speaking with us today. I'm Glenn. I'm from Hartford, Connecticut. And I want to ask, how do you bring up the conversation about Title IX, especially myself? I'm just starting to work in corporate America. So I know there's a lot of people in the generations before me that haven't been as open to it, but how do I start that conversation? And a second mini question, can I get a picture with you guys, please?
Sure, right after the program. Yeah.
Donna, you handle it.
Are you talking about Title IX in corporate America?
Yes, like just to educate people and get more familiar and advocate for it.
So using corporate America to educate parents about the Title IX rights of their children? Or I'm trying to understand.
Within corporate America, and then hopefully that will be a domino effect so you can bring it home and teach the kids and whatnot.
Okay.
So,
I'm not sure I'm clearly understanding the question. Is it how to use corporate America to better educate the corporate employee so they can go home and do something about Title IX inequities?
Yeah, how do I say it? Have a better influence so people understand Title IX, you know.
Yeah, I think every effort that you can make in any venue, be it your local church, having a program on the rights of your children to have equal access to all educational opportunities, that's a smart strategy to if your corporation has a weekly coffee or a place where everybody meets once a week and discusses topics of interest to employees. This is great for you to bring these things up. I hope I'm understanding your question.
I believe so. Thank you.
Why don't you just invite all of your workers and co-workers to a Mohegan Sun game, and Morgan will get you free tickets.
I think what Tara's saying is spot on. If you're passionate about something, if you come and you go to a game at Mohegan Sun and you buy the tickets and you invest one opportunity to see if you like the team, if you like the energy, if you like the surroundings, and you bring people and you say, this is really cool, look how hard they play, look what they're doing, look at the crowd support, then it becomes infectious. Then before you even have to study what Title IX is, you're passionate for us and you want to bring people out, and you'll naturally say, man, I went to a game the other night and it was unbelievable how hard they play, and it'll touch your soul. And that is how, like at the programs that were successful, that draw tons of people, the fans, women's basketball fans are really, really passionate. But you need to invest yourself in them, and then it comes back to you tenfold. But I would say, this is just me, buy the ticket. Have a little skin in the game. See if you like what we do. If you don't like it, you don't ever have to come back. If you do like it, spread the word, share your experience organically, and that will help us, and we'd be really appreciative.
But the other thing, and we have this example already, take your daughter to work day. So have a corporate take your son and daughter to a women's sports day so that your son grows up better respecting the skills and abilities of women, and your daughter is exposed to role models.
Thank you very much.
Thank you guys for being here. Thank you to our lovely panelists. Great job. That was amazing.
Great job.